Hi, I'm Dr. Marnie Ginsberg of Reading Simplified, and we're going to be talking about how just 3 elements of guided reading that you could do every day, every time you meet with a group, a small group, or with a kid one-on-one, will help you improve that kid's reading rapidly. And it will also reduce the stress you feel for what to teach, because there's so many variables, there's so many questions that we have as teachers, and we're given so much to do. I think if you keep these 3 features of a guided reading session, particularly for those early readers, if you keep this in mind, you'll find that it's a lot less burdensome for you. The number 1 tip that I have for you to begin and to incorporate into every guided reading session is to teach the blend as you read decoding strategy. You may not know what that is, so let me show it to you. It's in contrast to what a lot of us are taught. A lot of us are taught to teach our kids what I call the sound, sound, sound word approach. So the kid reads the word like hat, and they go ha, ah. And then the last thing they remember is the t, so they say tongue, or they say all sorts of crazy things, or they just struggle with blending it. Or maybe they can do 3 sounds, but they kind of get everything starts to break down at 4 sounds or 5 sounds. So whether your kids struggle with blending with 3 sounds or 4 sounds or 5 sounds or multi-syllable words, this strategy of blend as you read is a pretty strong cure-all for that problem. And I encourage you to give it a try. It will give your non-readers that entree into the code. So there's 2 things that I encourage you to do to teach the blend as you read strategy. First, I encourage you to teach it in the context of word work activities. And we call that word work activity read it. So I'm going to show you a video example of that. And then I also encourage you to do the same thing, encouraging your kids to blend as you read while they're reading a new text. So both of those venues or domains are really important to teach that decoding strategy. So they practice it in isolation for word work, and then they also incorporate it as well for guided reading or when they read aloud orally to you. So let's first see what blend as you read is. I mentioned it's not sound, sound, sound word, but what is it? Let's watch a little video and you can see an example of that.
Okay, 10 men went up. It could be. A lot of times we just say a or a. 10 men went up a hill. They went up a hill. So 10 of them went up a hill. There they waited very, how did they wait? They waited very good, and put them together and hold it. You had hold this sound.
That was just a snippet of how a student was blending as you read in the context of a new text. And you saw her put the sounds together as she went. Instead of saying t, what word? 10 or men or tongue? She put the first 2 sounds together. And I was coaching her to do that with that little notch card. 10. Do you see the difference? It's pretty subtle. So we would practice that activity in isolation in word work with maybe a dry erase board, and she would read a word like hat in isolation. We'd practice a blend as you read strategy. But here you see her putting it into play with an actual text. When you have that non-reader or that kid who's at the A, B, C, or D reading level and can only seem to use the picture clues or the predictable text to figure out what word comes next. So when you teach them the blend as you read strategy, they usually have like an aha about how the code works. And that aha gets them excited, and they start to be able to attack more and more words on their own. This little girl is getting the second tip that I recommend for guided reading when you're working with a beginner is to buddy read the hard words. So what do I mean by that? We're going to start our kids really quickly from the get-go with real text so they feel great about themselves, and yet, they can't read all the words, especially if they don't have any sight words or they have never decoded a word in their life. That's okay. Day 1, start them with a text like that I just showed you and read maybe 95% of the words, or maybe read 75% of the words for the student, or maybe read 50% of the words. Whatever the proportion may be, it will vary depending on the context, how many kids you got with you, and the kids' motivation or frustration levels. But I'll show you this example again. Watch how hard this young girl is working, and how much I'm helping her and how much she cannot do without my help, and yet she keeps persisting. But also notice that some words I just give her. So that's what I mean by buddy read. You might ask the child to read one word per page. You might ask the child to read one word per book. Whatever is the beginning level that kid can handle is what you want to do, so they get straight into a book. With the buddy reading and with the blend as you read, if your students know just a handful of letter sounds, they can do something, and that something thrills them and they want to learn more. And so you get a lot more activated brain power, is what I call it, because they're excited. Every kid who's coming into our schools knows that it's time to learn to read, and they want to be successful. So when you give them something that they are going to read and they're going to feel like they did it, they're much more likely to have a feeling of success, and then you'll get that positive snowball from their feeling of success. So let's watch another little clip, continuing of that clip. Notice how, again, I'm doing the blend as you read, but also doing some buddy reading where I don't make her do all the work.
This is a guy's name. Like an egg. Seth. That's a guy's name. Seth. And Seth and Zach. Put those together. Put those. Good. Seth and Zach had their. Put them together. Seth and Zach had their fill. So they went up a hill and waited very still, and those two had their fill.
The third thing is really important for beginning readers, and I want you to include it with all of your guided reading sessions, is to make sure you help those kids develop a brief summarization at the end. So they read a passage, and that one, the 10 Men, that's a really corny passage. Sometimes decodable texts are corny, but there's still a basic plot. So ask the student to summarize it. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do at the end of our reading sessions. Even if it's a super short summary, even if it's not perfect, get the student to articulate it. And what happens with young readers is that they give a partial answer, right? But I think it would be wise to have the students circle back around and restate the summary that they've created. So through your teacher drawing out and scaffolding, you get them to create a summary. But it would be super good when they're able for them to be challenged to then try to restate it in their own words. And so what's happening with the summary? First of all, we're teaching them that reading isn't just about the hard work of decoding, which can derail kids into missing the point of reading. It's about getting meaning, right? Secondly, it is a very challenging thinking skill. And it's really the fundamental skill that we need as readers. We pay attention to a text, and we need to translate it into something that's a briefer version of it in our mind. That's basically summarization. And then whatever we took in, we use either to persuade or to remember and be amused, or to write about. We have to kind of take the information that we read and make it our own. And a brief summary is the best foundational comprehension strategy skill that kids need to develop. So slip that into every guided reading session when you can.
So tell me what happened in this story. What happened in the beginning?
10 men were climbing up a hill.
Yes. And what happened to different groups? What are some things that happened to each pair?
2 got ill.
Mm-hmm.
2 fell down.
Mm-hmm.
2 didn't notice.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people did. Each pair did different things. Good job.
I just threw that in at the end. That's just a nice way to recap a lesson, get a little bit of rereading in as much as you can so that she builds some confidence and builds some fluency, but also maybe a little more automaticity with some of those words. Maybe they'll become sight words. So that's a typical pattern that we teach here at Reading Simplified.